Hello everyone and welcome to the Microsoft Security Update Summary, where I will present a short recap of what was released today, April 14th, 2026. My name is Josh Daniel, and I'm a risk manager in the customer service and support organization here at Microsoft. I'm going to start this video with an overview of the release, and then I'll dive into a few vulnerabilities. Please note that the details of the vulnerabilities I'm covering in this video may change, and the authoritative location for information will always be the online content in the Security Update Guide. Before I dig into today's release, I like to compare it to the previous 12 months to see how it stacks up. There are 166 newly disclosed CVEs in today's release. Of those, 20 fall into the remote code execution impact category. This is the type of impact that generally has the highest level of risk associated with it. It would allow a threat actor to install software on endpoints and other high-level activities. And that 20 from today's release is a little bit lower than our average over the past 13 months of about 24.5 per release. Next, I'll move into scoring, where Microsoft uses the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, or CVSS. This is an industry standard methodology to grade vulnerabilities on the same scale, so that a 9.8 vulnerability on one product represents the same level of risk as a 9.8 scored CVE in another product, another service, even an entirely different vendor. So it really allows us to be able to compare and contrast vulnerabilities on the same scale. This month, the highest scored CVE in today's set comes in at 9.8 on that scale of 10, and that's a little bit higher than our average of right around 9.5. Next, we'll take a look at the average CVSS score, which comes in at 7.18 across those 166 newly disclosed CVEs. It's a little bit lower than our average over the past 13 months of right around 7.35. Now, the CVSS score is a great starting point when we talk about the risk associated to a release, but it's not the only thing, and there are a handful of items that are not included in the CVSS score but still relate to risk that we should pay attention to. For example, the impact of a vulnerability is not registered in the CVSS score, nor is the severity, whether that's low, moderate, critical, as well as whether or not a vulnerability was publicly disclosed. This is a type of vulnerability where, in one way or another, the existence of the vulnerability has been made public prior to release. And what this allows a threat actor to do is kind of get a head start on building exploit code for a specific vulnerability. So this month, there's one publicly disclosed vulnerability, and I'll talk to that in just a few moments. And our average over the past 13 months is right around 1.5. Another item that relates to risk but is not calculated in that CVSS score is whether or not a vulnerability is known to be exploited or not. This month we have one. We've been averaging around 1.5 for the past 13 months. And this is a scenario where it's one step ahead of publicly disclosed, where the existence of the vulnerability was made public. This is where threat actors are actively exploiting customers, and we've detected that exploitation either directly through our own listening systems or along with our partner ecosystem. If publicly disclosed vulnerabilities represents a potential risk or a theoretical risk, then vulnerabilities known to be exploited represents a real risk, because real customers are actively being exploited due to a vulnerability. And so if we had to boil down all the stats related to the release, the two that I would look at would be the average CVSS score and the known to be exploited. Since there's one vulnerability that's already known to be exploited, it depends a little bit on what that vulnerability is and how easy it is to exploit. That might help you decide whether this is a month to skip patching or delay patching. And we'll talk about that one in just a few moments, but it is imperative that we pay attention to the vulnerabilities that are known to be exploited. These are the ones where customers are the most at risk. Okay, so that's enough of a comparison, and let's dive into just this release. We'll start with the overview chart, where, as we can see, we have our Windows products, And then as we move up, we move into products that are not necessarily serviced every single month. Starting at the bottom, we have Office with a handful of vulnerabilities this month that are addressed with updates that were released today. As we move into the Windows products, depending on the specific Windows operating system, we've been averaging somewhere in the upper 50s to lower 60s. And as we can see, we're well above that on all the versions of Windows this month. As we move up the chart, we have a couple of vulnerabilities in SharePoint that are being addressed with updates. We'll talk about one of those in a moment. Microsoft.NET and Visual Studio developer tools. These have some updates that are available to address some vulnerabilities. Microsoft Dynamics has a single vulnerability this month that's addressed with an update for Dynamics 365. SQL Server has 3 vulnerabilities that are being addressed with updates to SQL Server this month. And rounding it all out, we have a System Center Endpoint Protection adjacent vulnerability. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's dive into a vulnerability within Windows. This is documented as CVE 2026-33824. This is a critical remote code execution vulnerability in the Internet Key Exchange component of Windows. This was privately disclosed to Microsoft with no known exploits out in the wild. This is the vulnerability that comes in at that high watermark of 9.8 on that CVSS scale that goes up to 10. The attack vector is over the network. The attack complexity is low. No privileges are required, and no user interaction is required to leverage this. We do have a mitigation here, but I do want to point out that the mitigation is only for this individual vulnerability and is intended to only cover the gap between when the vulnerability was made public, which is today, and when the update can be installed on the system itself. So, for example, if you deploy this mitigation on your affected systems, you're protected against this vulnerability, but not the other 36 vulnerabilities that were part of yesterday's release. So it helps you with one, but not the rest. So it's really important that this is only considered a stopgap until the update can be installed on all your vulnerable systems. There's no documented workarounds as far as the affected software. It's all versions of Windows and mainstream support, whether that's Windows 11 or Server 2016 up through Server 2025. Next, we have a vulnerability documented as CVE 2026-33825. This is an important elevation of privilege vulnerability in the Microsoft Defender anti-malware platform. This one was publicly disclosed prior to release, but no known exploits are known in the wild. This vulnerability was made public last week and is also known as Blue Hammer. So to protect your systems from this vulnerability known as Blue Hammer or CVE 2026-33825, there's an update to the Defender anti-malware platform that needs to be installed. Now that happens as part of Defender's normal update cycle, which can either be done automatically or can be controlled through tools such as System Center Endpoint Protection. So if you're controlling the Defender updates, you may want to unthrottle those or deploy these as soon as you possibly can so you can protect against this vulnerability that's already publicly disclosed. This one has a base CVSS score of 7.8. The attack vector is local. The attack complexity is low. Low privileges are required, and user interaction here is none. There are no documented mitigations or workarounds for this. And again, the affected software here is the Microsoft Defender anti-malware platform. It's not a signature update, it's a platform update, but those platform updates come along with the normal Defender update cadence. And finally, we have a vulnerability documented as CVE 2026-32201. This is an important spoofing vulnerability in SharePoint. This one was privately disclosed, but this is the one where exploit was detected prior to release. This one has a base CVSS score of 6.5. The attack vector is over the network. The attack complexity is low. No privileges are required, and no user interaction is required to leverage this. There are no documented mitigations or workarounds for this. As far as the affected software, it's SharePoint 2019, SharePoint Enterprise 2016, and SharePoint Subscription Edition. All right, that's all I have for today. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your day to listen to me talk about Microsoft vulnerabilities and how to protect your systems. And I will talk to you all next month. Thank you.